So this evening I'm going to take you through a fly. It's one of my very favorites. I use it whenever there's a midge hatch or even a blue-winged olive hatch. I use this as an emerger or a cripple. Um, so this one I'm going to start with, this is actually a size 22 hook. It looks pretty large because I've got a really good close-up on this camera. And I'm going to show you in a little bit later in this video a size 30, a true size 30. These flies are very, very small. But these are quill body flies, CDC wing. Here we're just going to put a layer of tan, kind of an olive thread. This is 8/0. So you can see the size of that hook when 8/0, which is very thin thread. It looks pretty thick on the hook. Here we're just going to take some feather just tips, wrap those in, and with the emergers and midges we really want to keep the tails not quite as long as the hook shank. Here I've got them just about the same size. Those tails might be just a little bit too long, but they fish just fine. I have tried just about every kind of hackle plier there is, and especially with these smaller flies when I'm in kind of tight quarters, I just like to use my fingers. It's interesting. I guess it's muscle memory. But I'm just going to use my fingers, big stubby fingers, to wrap this around. Again, try not to compress the tail. It's hard to see the tail against that white background, but it's there. I'm just going to keep taking wraps, make sure that quill is touching itself on the next wrap around. It's hard. These flies are so small. It's really tough to see. Also, this quill is soaked in water, so I'll soak these things and make them soft. If you don't soak the quill, it'll just split out, and so they soak up just like a rawhide or something. It's interesting. It's a protein. You can see how pliable it is, almost like a rubber band. Then we just take a wrap around to secure it in. I'm going to trim it off here, and there's always a little tag end there. We'll just try to push it down just a little bit. Take a wrap or two around there so that we can secure in our CDC. Now the CDC stands for Col de Canard, which is just feathers that are around the duck's preening gland. These feathers have natural oils in them. You don't use floatant on CDC. It floats itself just fine. I'm going to cinch that in, take another try on this one. I'm just going to take that, and then we're going to make just a couple wraps, then we're going to fold it over and double it. So you've got two little tufts of CDC. They actually goes together, makes a pretty nice little wing, an emerger wing. Now we're going to take whip finish around this. We're going to whip finish this one just to the back of the wing there. We're not going to worry about the hook eye. It's so small. If you try to get in front of that hook eye, it's just going to mess things up. So I'm just going to do a couple of turns. I'll whip finish here. Trim that as close as we can. And then we're going to trim that second stub of the wing. We're just going to trim that, hold it, and trim it. And that'll create our wing for our emerger. Very, very effective. I'll give you a 360 view here. You can see the tail a little bit better there. And that the quill body just tends to float a little bit better. I don't think it absorbs quite as much water as like a dubbin body does. Here is a true size 30 hook, and these are Gamakatsu size 30s. These are just a kind of a little circle hook. Actually, you'll see this just barely fits inside the vise. You'll see later on, it's about the same size as the numbers on a penny. That's compared to a size 20. Oh no, that's the 22 we just tied. So it's very much smaller than the 22. A true size 30. It's amazing that fish can see this fly. But again, we're just going to take the same pattern. We're just going to make a couple of wraps here. And with that 8/0 thread, like 3 or 4 wraps almost covers the hook. This is extreme close up. Here we are with some tailing fibers again. And here we're just going to try to tie in just the ends of those tailing fibers, just the points. And it's a little bit long, so we're gonna this is really tough. This is a challenge. All right, we're gonna pull this forward just a little bit. Again, we want it just a little bit shorter than the shank of the hook. Left it just about the same length as the shank. I'm going to tie this back. You can see the tail splay out just a little bit. That'll be okay. I'm just going to trim this off close. We're going to tie in our quill. Here's a little piece of feather. I'm just stripping the quill. Stripping the feathers off. Different feathers have a different color quill. It's very interesting. This is just a little gray feather, little dun, light dun colored feather. I've already soaked this one, so this one's very pliable. It's also a very thin little quill. This is a tiny feather. I'm going to tie this one in and crank it down. You can see the tailing fibers just sort of compress a little bit. If they point downwards a little, it's just fine. Bring that up. Only about 3 wraps. And again, I'm not using hackle pliers on this. The hackle plier just gets in the way. We're just going to use the fingers. This one wasn't quite as clean as I wanted it to be. This is really, really tight and tiny. So there's a little gap right there that I missed, but this fly will fish just fine. This is a perfect fly when you're fishing to super picky trout and they're tiny, tiny midges on the water surface and you can't tell what in the heck they're taking. Put on this little size 30. It's amazing that it'll even hook into a fish's mouth, but it will. I've landed several fish on this little tiny 30 fly. All right, this is a challenge. So we're going to put the CDC in and we're going to just try to loop it in and it catches just perfect, just like that. Just a little tiny puff. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull that forward and secure it down just so it puts a little bit of forward pressure onto that CDC. Perfect. Now we'll just do a little whip finish here. About 3 turns there. I think we're only going to do 2 more turns. The thread on this hook, it loads up very quickly. So I trim that close. Trim off the CDC forward. Just a little puff there. And there you have it. We'll do a little rotation on this one too. Not a bad little fly. Again, you don't use floatant on this one. You just You just tie it on the. This one is really good for with 6X is almost too big for this hook eye. 7X works very, very well with this fly. But boy, do you have to be careful. Well, you can see the tail a little bit better adjusting the hook. I'm going to show you again this one compared to the. So you can see that's actually behind the fly. So that is a size, I think that's an 18. That's an 18. There's the little tiny fly, about the same size as the numbers on a penny. Hope you enjoyed this video, and tight lines on the Provo this winter.